Welcome to the Chaplain's Assistant's Motor Pod, delivering the missiles to the masses. I'm your host, Gary. You may know me by such names as Ironmonger or Kuda Zappa or IG Gary V or GI Gary. GI Gary coming from my friends over at the Pina Comics podcast. As a collector of GI Joe, I talk about it a lot, and most of the time I just annoy my wife. So I figured, hey, why not get it out over the airwaves and try this podcasting thing? Today is the first episode, and the first thing I'm going to talk about is my love of Joe. And obviously, I'm an old school guy, discovering G.I. Joe in 1985 with Sunbow and action figures. And then in 1991, I discovered the comic book. I really got into the lore of G.I. Joe as an 11-year-old, because I was more able to immerse myself into that world than the Deke cartoon series. And as such, the comic book kept my love of the action figures alive. Actually reignited that love of toys. And I kept collecting G.I. Joe up until 1993. In 94, there was just nothing I wanted to buy, no matter how hard I looked. I wasn't buying Star Brigade, and I wasn't buying the monsters or any of that. That was just, nope, I'm good. I want, Stalker, I want Snake Eyes, I want Flint. And when I went to the stores, they just weren't there on the pegs. So that's why 93 was the last year I collected the figures. And the comic book was kind of the same way. The comic book ended with 155, and then looked for the special number 1, got told it was sold out everywhere, and then didn't collect G.I. Joe again until Devil's Due in 2001, with issue number 2, discovering it while trying to finish putting together the original 155 Marvel comic run. And then that was it. I haven't missed an issue of G.I. Joe since then, and have dabbled buying the modern era 4-inch. I'm now collecting the G.I. Joe Classified line. And through other podcasts and other stuff, I've really discovered my love of G.I. Joe really comes from the O-Ring line. It really comes from the comic books. And the extension of that is the new G.I. Joe Classified series, as I think they look pretty neat on display upstairs room, while the basement is a complete disaster area of me trying to make it organized and make room for a flag display and trying to get all that worked out. It's a lot harder to organize when you have a lot of stuff. I would recommend to anybody building a new collection is figure out what you're trying to do. I went into buying things as, hey, you got a whole collection for sale, I'll buy that. And then I did that 3 more times. And I ended up with so much stuff, it's hard to move around. And I had to get a storage unit, and it's just too much stuff. And I'm going through stuff, and I'm discovering things, and I'm on the internet looking at stuff, and and I'm finding things, and I just want to share those findings with you guys. And right now, today, I've got a couple things I want to talk about. I want to talk about the new Cobra Trooper. I just opened mine up yesterday. I got it through Roma Collectibles, and I also another order through Hasbro Pulse. And I finally opened one up, and I looked at it. I'm going to compare it to my Cobra Island Cobra Trooper. After that, going to take a look at a vehicle I just finished putting together, the G.I. Joe Mauler. There's a lot of moving parts into that, and it's really interesting. All right, we got the Cobra Trooper from G.I. Joe Classified 6-inch. Now, the real way to talk about this is to compare it to the Target exclusive Cobra Island Cobra Trooper. Now, the first thing that stands out is the Cobra Island Cobra Trooper has those snake slit night vision goggles that some people have been able to fit around his helmet. I have not found it to fit well around that. It does fit underneath the helmet over his eyes, and that's like the first piece of kit that doesn't have. The other thing that the regular release Cobra Trooper doesn't have is the sniper rifle. The same machine gun rifle that he is shared, the Nerf layout, which I'm not a huge fan of, standard between the two. The other thing is you also don't have the armband that signifies like the Cobra Island Cobra Trooper is either the leader of his unit or a point man, but that's also not present. The knife is the same. The pistols are the same. And there's 2 pistols each. There's 1 knife each that goes into the left shoulder scabbard. And, and that's pretty similar. Now, where you get into the real difference is the colors of the troopers. Now, the Cobra Island Trooper uses a more darker or deeper hued blue, and so it's overall darker than the regular issue. The helmets are similar, slightly, again, another slight different color change. The legs on the regular release do have some black paint on the thighs, where the quadriceps would be, and then the arms on the Cobra Island Trooper have the black accents, and it's a deep or darker black, and the same area is a lighter black on the regular release. Now, the vest on the Cobra Island is black, and the vest on the regular release is again like a dark gray, really dark gray, and also the webbing on the regular release has gray accents, so it does stand out differently than the Cobra Island version. Now, the one thing I have been avoiding is talking about the eyes. Now, in the Cobra Island Cobra Trooper, it is, it looks like a Caucasian male is underneath the helmet, behind the mask, brown eyes and brown eyebrows. However, on the regular retail release of the Cobra Trooper, all is dark-skinned. So he would be like, I would say, an African-American or a Latino descent. It's the same mold, it's just darker paint. And the skin tone being much darker, it's kind of an odd choice for me. My thing is, if you look back on the original O-ring line, there was only one Cobra villain that was a non-Caucasian. And that's kind of brilliant if you think about it. The only non-Caucasian was Storm Shadow, and quickly did not stay that way. With this modern line, and I understand that, good and bad people come in all shapes and colors. It's very weird as a vintage collector or an O-ring collector seeing this. It was pretty subversive in the 1980s because I didn't notice this until it was brought to my attention a couple of years ago. And now I'm seeing it in my hands right now. Now, does it make me not like the regular issue Cobra Trooper as much? Kinda, sorta. It bothers me because, it's just like, it's that uncomfortable thing. It's the reality of the world. And, G.I. Joe is one of those things that, go to escape a little bit of the reality of the world. And it's also easier for me to swallow a person of my skin tone being evil rather than thinking about somebody from a foreign land being evil, because the way we were raised, expect the good out of people. They look great. The Cobra Trooper having just a little less kit than the Cobra Island Cobra Trooper, disappointing because, a lot of people couldn't get their hands on the Cobra Island stuff. Everybody calls them, eBay exclusives or rather than Target exclusives, because they're so hard to obtain. I was really lucky during the first wave of Cobra Island to be on vacation, and I religiously went to the store looking for these. And the line still is hard to find. It's a solid figure. It's definitely worth the pickup. Coming into stock, they made a lot of them, and it looks like they're going to be around for a while. Solid get. I hope at one point, Target does re-release the Cobra Island line, but we don't know what that's going to be, when it's going to be. And again, as others have said, it's also a sign of the distributor faith of the product rather than the fans' faith in the product. So the classified line, far exceeding expectations for demand, we can only assume that later waves are going to be produced in larger numbers, because we all know right now retailers do not want toys or action figures sitting in the clearance bin. And as I remember from the 2012, 2013 era, I remember people waiting for, the Toys R Us, because Toys R Us is the only retailer, waiting for things to go on clearance before they bought them, which was kind of a dick move on collectors' parts, ensuring that the line stays around. However, I do remember picking up Eagle Hawks for as low as $7 at Toys R Us clearance, and then me, keeping one or two, and then selling the rest online for like $50, and then now crying because I can't believe how much they're going for now, and I'll never get another one. And there's that. Now, as I said earlier, one of the big things I did when getting back into collecting G.I. Joe was I bought lots. And I'm talking about if it was anything from an action figure lot, like I bought from John over at Pint of Comics, so he could go to New York Comic Con, to Getting Divorced sale. Bought the guy's entire collection because he was in the middle of a divorce. And then I bought 3 collections that were of the original owner, and those were really special. 2 of those dromes, 2 of them had Defiance. It's the only way I was able to put together a 99% complete Defiant. Michael has a couple issues left to be fixed. The airlock door has a pin broken, and the spring is broken on one of the elevators for the mechanism to raise it. But part of that was, I got a whole bunch of vehicles at once, and figures actually don't take up much room. That you can fit a couple hundred action figures in a small closet in like little tackle boxes that you get at Walmart, which is what I do. But vehicles don't. With vehicles ranging everything from the size of the Defiant to the Flag, which even when it breaks down, takes up a ton of room. And when you add in other, the Jets, the Conquest 19, Ace and the Sky Striker, the Night Raven, those are all big jets. But then you also end up with relatively reasonably sized but smaller but fragile vehicles such as the Mauler. And the Mauler is a vehicle, earlier this year I took apart several of them, 6, and I repaired them to the point where I got 4 working, and I ended up keeping 3. Now, one of the cool things is there's a major variation, at least in my mind, of the Canadian Mauler being different than the American Mauler. Now, what is the variation? Well, the Canadian Mauler uses different screws. Not different threaded screws. They're not different length screws. They're a different head. They use a Robertson head and not a Phillips head. Now, we all know the Phillips head is the cross, but a Robertson head was the most popular fastener in Canada. It's essentially a square head, and it's a small square head. So you'll need to find, if you decide to take apart a Canadian one, you're going to have to find a special Robertson. It's like a 1 or 1.5 square. Most bit kits that you would buy at Home Depot or Lowe's, they don't go that small. And what I ended up doing was I ended up filing down a flathead so I could go corner to corner and take them out when I was repairing my Canadian one. The other 5 I had were all American, so they all came out easy with a number 1 and number 2 screwdriver. So, taking a look at the Mauler, a lot of small parts to take into consideration. Before we even talk about the driver heavy metal, 2 antennas, a long one and a short one. The short one is harder to find and is more expensive as such. You have the left and right gas, which launch the smoke, pop smoke when you want to obscure your tank. So hopefully the cloud is big, because the tank is pretty big itself and is pretty noisy for somebody to lock onto. And the left and right of the smoke pictures, and they even don't sit well inside even when you do have them, and even when you do have the correct ones, not the ones for the Slaughter's Marauders version of the Mauler. Now, the other thing you also have with the mauler and small parts department is you have the tow rope. Now, the tow rope isn't often as the Wolverine tow cable, same mold, broken, because the mauler tow cable isn't under any tension when you mount it on the side. So the mauler tow rope is the same dark gray as the smoke containers and as the antennas and as the rear toggle for the motor. So easy way to tell if it's the right one for the mauler. The other thing you got with the mauler is you got the 4 rubber mud flaps in the front and the rear, two in the front, 2 in the rear. They're rubber. If you find them hard plastic, and they look exactly the same, but they're hard plastic, that also goes to the Slaughter's Marauders equalizer. And then you get the bogey wheels. The bogey wheels are always, the tabs are breaking on them. And while apparently the mauler didn't come with a bogey wheel for the rear switch, it does look good on top of one, and there's enough spare parts maulers around to pick up a bogey wheel, or even use a broken one with a broken tab on it, and because you won't even see the broken tab when it's mounted. Now, the other thing about the mauler, with it being it's also motorized, and many of them are not working. Now, if it's not working, it's not an excuse to if you're looking to get rid of one, don't say not tested. Pick up 4C batteries, get them into the battery box, and test it. If you're going to get rid of one of these things, don't do a collector a favor. Tell them if you tested it. Just test it. It's not a bad thing. But if it doesn't work, what do? So you can take apart the mauler with 7, for the most part, 7 easy screws on the bottom. So the first 4 screws hold the tabs in place that keep the top shell from the bottom shell. So you get that done, and I got mine right here. I'm taking it apart right now. I got it loosely together. They come out, and then you can separate the 2 halves. Now, next up, the other thing you got to do is then, depending on the version, again, this is also another one where there's multiple versions of the molds, where they decided how many screws they were going to have holding the battery box to the chassis. Some have 2, some have 3. Depending on which one you have is the one you have. So you take them out, and the battery box should come out with the motor attached and the switch and everything. It's pretty self-evident once you get it apart. Now, the easiest way to test this, by far the easiest way to test it, if it's not working with the 4 batteries on the bottom, is pop those batteries back out, and then there's 2 ways to do this. You can use a 9-volt battery. Make sure that you only use it just a touch, because if prolonged use of these batteries on a motor will burn it out. However, or you can do what I did was, and I'll leave a link in the description below for a video I did of taping together the 4C batteries using electrical tape, making 2 wire leads, and then running and then even if you use 9-volt, you just want to have 2 wire leads that goes to the motor, direct to the motor. When you have the battery box out, the motor is just hanging in the wind, and you just take the 2 leads and you just touch the motor, and just see if it spins. Now, I started with 6 maulers. And actually, I started with 5. And then I bought another non-working one for actually a really awesome deal on eBay. And the one that I got off of eBay, the motor worked. The problem was one of the wires, it degraded over time and wasn't making connection. So the motor was fine. I ended up with 4 working maulers because I took the time to check the motor out. If the motor's not burned out, these things are actually easy to get working again. You can use vinegar and baking soda. That's my preferred way, and you can scrub the contacts down on the battery box and put the batteries back in, flick the switch. Invest in, go to Harbor Freight. You don't have to spend a lot of money. Get a multimeter. Check to see if the switch works. Check to see for continuity in the switch. Check to make sure the current can pass through from point A to point B. Make sure the switch is good. I found on all 6 battery boxes, the switches were good. So the switch to me doesn't seem to be a common failure point. The motor is a common failure point because 2 out of 6. That's 1 out of 3. And then the last thing was, I had corrosion on the battery contacts, and once because I had a couple bad battery boxes, I stripped them from parts. That's what you do to get things running again. And I'm not really a creative person. I'm a parts replacer. I'll diagnose and then I'll replace parts. I'm not a fancy guy like Toy Ploy, molding new crotches and stuff. I can do it. I just have I can just be honest and say I have absolutely none of the patience to do it, because I tend to hurry up and rush and then I get frustrated. But as essentially a glorified parts replacer, and I made, you can get the batteries to work. If the motor works, you can get the battery box to work. And then there's one other thing to pay attention to with the Mauler chassis, and that is the gearbox. So at the back of the gearbox is where you get to go into low and high gear, and it's essentially a transmission, where the switch slides a lever that gear toggle between a low gear and a high gear, and with the whirring cogs and stuff, it controls the speed of the Mauler. When it's in low gear, you can even slide the toggle on the Mauler left to right to make it turn left to right. Now, I'm just going to say this, as a 40-something man, it's a lot harder to chase after the Mauler now than it would have been when I was, 7 or 8. So make it to left to right too often, other than to check to make sure it actually is working. But the other point is the transmission, is what I'm going to call it now. This transmission is specific to the Mauler chassis. So there was 2 variations in the gears. So like a light green and a dark green, for lack of a better term. So when you're taking one of these apart, pay attention to the colors of the gears and the transmission, so you can make sure that if you're taking multiples of these apart, like I did, you're putting them back together again in the right way. Because if you don't, we end up doing what I found, slipping. So you'll put it into gear and you hear like, oh, okay, then you put it on the ground, and you put it on the ground. Next thing you hear, and that's literally the gear slipping on another gear, and that's not good. It's designed to mesh. If it's not meshing, it is going to put a dead spot in on the chassis and completely strip the gear on the transmission, and that is no good. And then you'll be a sad, smaller working motor, but goes nowhere. So other points with the Mauler is, like I said, with the bogies. The bogies sit on in single shear axles. So, they come out right off with the 2 prongs, but the 2 prongs is held in together in between the bogies with a screw, and in the screw has a little bracket that goes on top. On this bracket, the bracket is the same color as the Mauler. The bogies are on another dark gray plastic that's the same dark gray as shared with all the other accessories. Clip that holds mechanism to the chassis, the top clips break. I found a lot of broken ones, and what it does is it limits the movement of the bogies up and down. So think of it like as a suspension limit. If you break the clips, the bogies move up and down pretty darn good, and but I have a feeling at that point you're going to lose tension on your tracks, and then the tracks it's just going to slip, or the track could fall off. If you have a non-working motor, you're looking for something to display or looking to do something customizable, that's something to think about. Reasonably buy. You have to ask for these things because they're commonly broken. An amazing vehicle, about a week's worth of nights, hard cleaning, which part, and move forward with it. It was a good learning experience, and it made me appreciate what the toy designers did that much more. Now, the Mauler's inspiration comes from the High Survivability Test Vehicle Lightweight. So that is also known as the HSTV, sometimes a dash, sometimes a slash L. So as you know, as G.I. Joe loves her acronyms, that doesn't spell anything. So you can't sell it as that. You can sell it as a Mauler. Now, one of the interesting things is the High Survivability Test Vehicle / Lightweight is not a main battle tank like what the Mauler was described as on the box. The Mauler has a taller turret for it, but the HSTVL is smaller. The HSTVL was a prototype for the United States Army that didn't make it out of the testing phase. It was a very fast moving tank, but it was not designed to take a hit. It was lightweight. So it was designed to take a licking for a little bit and keep on ticking. Typically, they said survivability after a hit would result in the loss of one crew member, which is kind of morbid to think about it as a civilian. But I guess in the Army, they have to think about acceptable losses. And but apparently with one crewman down, the tank would keep on fighting. And never made it past that. This is also the era where the main battle tank, the M1 Abrams, will come out of. The Mauler is also known for having one of the most notoriously difficult action figures to have complete come with it. And we know him as Heavy Metal. Heavy Metal is a tanker. He has dirt around his face from the dust of tanking, and his mold would get reused in the Rampage figure out of Brazil. But the thing about Heavy Metal is he came with two accessories. He came with a machine gun, which is reasonably expensive to find it without the strap broken, but also the ridiculously hard to find microphone. Now, the microphone is often missing, and even when you do find him loose with the microphone, many people think that the loose one with the microphone is actually sporting a reproduction. Now, that has led many people to shy away from open examples of Heavy Metal, or having a sealed example to serve as their guide if the reproduction or not reproduction microphone is with their loose figure. Reproductions have gotten so good that they can fool the above average eye. And Heavy Metal is a great figure to have. I have yet to find a microphone for him. I have yet to pay the money for a genuine microphone, and I don't know when that's going to happen, all honestly, because there are things that I need to spend my money on more, like food and mortgage. So that closes out for the Mauler discussion today. If you got anything to add or disagree with, you can email me at iggaryv@gmail.com. If you want to hit me up, I am most active on the Twitter at iggaryv. I'm also on Instagram at iggaryv, where I forget that I have an Instagram account, and I post there once every couple weeks. So that's it for the first episode of the Chaplain's Assistance Motor Pod. Hope it was good. I hope you enjoyed it. Looking to get a rhythm going and doing these semi often. And so you can download this wherever you found your pods or wherever you found this to begin with. Thanks for listening, and Yojo!